There's a really important disclaimer before I get into this video that this approach is not going to be meant for everybody at every single point in place in time. If you feel deeply uncomfortable moving forward with this process, on one hand, it could just mean that, this process is uncomfortable and you should still potentially move through with it, but it also could mean you're just not ready to do this yet. Use your intuition to decide what is best, and also consider that you can have support in these situations. You don't have to do it alone. You never want to push or pressure yourself if you genuinely feel it's not right. If you're in a place where you aren't ready, whether that means that you're struggling mentally, emotionally, etc., just hold back for a second. You can set the intention that this process is going to find you whenever the time is right. If you feel unsure about moving forward with directly addressing past trauma, pain, or experiences, definitely speak to a licensed professional. This is not to force anybody who is not ready for this process into this situation, because that could be potentially damaging or dangerous. So I talk a lot about transmission of negative energy, and I feel like I kind of bypass the steps of how to do it. I know I posted a TikTok recently talking about it, but it wasn't really going into any extreme detail. And I think that in a lot of ways, yes, you kind of need to fill in the gaps with, what these answers and reasons are, but I still don't feel like it's enough detail to really hit the ground running. So what is negative energy? I think energy in general is a challenging topic in conversation because not only is it so nuanced, but it's so abstract. It's literally like talking about things which are real but are not real. And I know that's the whole job of an intuitive and a channeler, but on a certain level, this is anything and everything. This is existence. And while I do feel I have a pretty good handle on it and grasp on it, I just feel like there are just some things that I'm never going to know, that the collective isn't going to know. And I think, that's kind of intentional on purpose in our matrix reality. Negative energy, I think there's a collective understanding of what negative energy is. I don't think that all negative energy is, from a larger perspective, negative, right? There are learning lessons that we're supposed to go through here on Earth, and I think that everything ultimately is intended to have a good outcome, but of course we can classify it in the meantime as negative energy. Yes, it's true that negative energy is kind of relative, so what may be negative for you is not negative at a certain point in place in time for me. So again, I think it's just up to anyone and everyone to determine what that is. I typically notice a lot of negative energy comes from past traumas, past experiences, past memories. It could be earlier in this lifetime, or it also could be from past lives. It can even be kind of inherited into your genetic code, your DNA, through ancestry karma. I suppose we could just have a definition that negative energy is just what you don't want to have around. I typically notice that people have a lot of negative energy when they're stuck in loops. Loops are essentially energetic patterns which keep repeating themselves over and over and over again. It's consciousness which loops, which is something that can be helpful at times, right? For example, a positive loop that you can be in is brushing your teeth every single day. But of course you can be in negative loops which are comprised of negative behavior, which you want to cut out and stop. The tricky thing about this is that oftentimes we're not aware that we are in a loop. And it really takes some getting out of our own perspective in order to have this general understanding. From an energetic fractaling perspective, I do truly believe that we are all part of source energy, and source energy is pretty much just energy, I guess you could say. It's source, it's what people would perceive to be God. So in that sense, we are all connected. The lower the density and the lower the dimension, the more fractaled we are. So if we imagine that this source energy is like a circle, through this kind of mitosis process, we're all fractaling, right? That's how another person exists, but also you exist. We're all still part of source energy, but we have very different energetic resonances, energetic sources in a particular point in place in time, in a particular density or dimension. Generally, the belief is that when we pass on from here, we can kind of ascend upward, because the higher the density and the dimension, the less fractaling there is. Also, generally, people perceive that this is more so what peace, calmness, wholeness, nirvana is. So the more that you bring all of your parts together and the less fractal that you are, the more ascended and evolved you are, and the more positive of vibration that you have. Obviously, everyone is, entitled to not only disagree, but have their own outlook on this ideology, and that's totally fine. This is just like somewhat of the context before we go into this discussion, which I think can be helpful. So how does this negative energy work? I like to imagine that our energetic resonances it's kind of like this like long cylindrical source of energy or source of light within our bodies. This is our source vibration. This is kind of like the everything vibration. This is what we take when we pass on, and it's not super specific to this particular incarnation. I do feel that in this lifetime, we kind of like attract all of these energetic orbs around us. This sort of comprises our personality, our traits. It can even be the experiences that we've had in this lifetime, but essentially things which are more relevant or more important to this particular incarnation. Some of these energies can be positive and some of them can of course be negative. So we can kind of like visually imagine that we've got this cylindrical energetic resonance, and then I like to think of these other added kind of like energetic bonuses as orbs, which kind of like stick to each other. I kind of imagine them to be circles. It's kind of like a nerd's rope. So over time, these energetic orbs kind of ebb and flow. They're not necessarily permanent like our cylindrical source energy is more so permanent in this lifetime. It's of course totally fine to have the positive ones stick to us, but it's more important to have these changing and evolving, which I do truly believe is the intention for this lifetime. If we want to ladder it back to the concept of densities, the less dense that we are, technically the more whole that we are, or more evolved and ascended we are. But again, up to your discretion and what you believe. Since we are fractal beings in this lifetime, we have a lot of space to collect these energetic orbs, whether it be, again, positive or negative. We're always kind of on this mission to make ourselves more whole, right? Whether that's being more peaceful, more happy, maybe finding a significant other, finding a community. We ideally don't ever want to feel isolated or alone. So a lot of times we sort of cling on to these energetic orbs, whether they are positive or negative, in order to help us feel more whole. The problem with attracting negative orbs is not just that we're carrying around this energetic burden, but it also sort of becomes a prism in which we see and view the world. It becomes our perception value, and it's kind of warped. Ideally, we want to transmute out these negative orbs so that we lose this warped perception value. And we just don't want to be carrying around this negative energy. I think that a lot of people are very skeptical that you can lose negative energy, particularly if you've had a certain amount of traumas. But the great news is that we are ascending very rapidly as a collective. Things are more complex and faster than they were before, which definitely has its detriment. But in terms of how fast energy is moving, this can be great for transmuting negative energy, pain, and trauma, because it can kind of be achievable in one lifetime. Also, just to mention, there are definitely alternate ways that you can move energy or release negative energy and put positive energy back into you, such as Reiki healing. But if that's not an option for you right now, you could definitely do this on your own. The first part of this process is acknowledgement. Now, this may sound obvious, but it actually is a little bit more challenging than you think to acknowledge for one of two reasons. The first reason is that oftentimes we are in these loops and we're totally not aware of it. We've only lived this one life, so we don't have an outsider's perception value to understand if our behavior is not aligned to us, it's negative, it's detrimental. That's why experimenting and experiencing new options and opportunities is particularly helpful. On the other hand, acknowledgement is really the first part of this process, so it can be kind of challenging to do, because then it's front and center. You're aware of it. You're bringing this negative energetic orb, which was likely rejected or repressed, up to the surface. This means not only are you very aware of it, but it's going to be like really, really challenging to kind of get rid of it again. It may also mean that it's more significantly or severely impacting your life. It becomes almost impossible not to address it or take full responsibility for it. So I do feel like a lot of people avoid this in general. But acknowledgement truly is the first step, because again, you're bringing up this energy, you're aware of it, and it is more challenging to recompartmentalize it. If you're struggling with understanding what loops are negative for you, of course you can do the trial and error experimentation process, but you can also ask your spirit guides to bring this information forward to you through signs. So the next one is acceptance. So this is where energy in terms of fractaling and being whole becomes a little bit paradoxical, because obviously we are whole without this negative energy, but this process kind of like ironically is accepting this negative energy and bringing it to be a part of us. But let me explain. When we're not accepting the negative energy which we are holding on to, it still exists on our energetic body, but it is rejected, repressed, compartmentalized. It lives in like a tiny box wherever on our body or in our brain. We are not accessing it. We do not want to think about it. However, it is of course still affecting us. This process of acceptance is kind of like releasing the shame and guilt of this situation. It's saying it is okay that this, energy is a part of me. And just to be really clear, this does not mean that it like permanently becomes a part of you. It's actually the opposite. It allows You just start allowing yourself to release it. The guilt and shame does not allow for release. When you bring it back into your body is the transmuter. And this is really the only way this process works. You have to make it a part of you in order to release it from you. I know it's weird. There is a fear fallacy that if you accept this, you become a part of it. But ironically, it is already a part of you. If acknowledgement is like, I see it, acceptance is, I'm ready to do it, and you're facing it head on. All right, next comes the proactive transmission phase, the most fun phase, the last phase. So I personally find that there are two different ways that you can do. If, for example, you have a memory which is negative, which could be from past lives or from this life, you can really face it head on through guided meditations where you go back into this memory and you reframe it in regards to the truth. And by that I mean this. A lot of memories that we have, we kind of sever short because we're only looking at it through our own perception value. We tend to put a lot of blame on ourselves for whatever negativity was created or was and is perpetuated. But the truth is, outside of our egos, this is just a very natural process. I know this kind of sounds like, you're removing yourself from bad doings or bad acts or anything that's like evil. But the higher level perspective is that negativity always exists, and it's just kind of bopping around to all of these different people who are essentially projecting it. Negative energy from a really high level perspective is a victimless crime. Yes, of course, you need to take responsibility for the actions that you've done as well as transmuting this negative energy. But again, from a higher level, it's sort of detached from you as a person and your ego. Life happens, shit happens. Time to deal with it. Past life regressions are also helpful. Reiki healing is also helpful. Really anything that you're doing to readdress this could also be therapy. This approach is definitely more head-on. The second approach is a little bit different, and it's not as head-on, it's not as obvious. There's a lot of fear associated with moving forward when we have accumulated a lot of negative energy under a particular concept or theme. Say, for example, we've had a lot of bad luck or negative experiences with dating. Indirect transmission of this energy would essentially say that you need to find new options and opportunities to seek out under the umbrella of dating, but it doesn't have to be dating, right? Dating is just a physical manifestation of, love and romance, right? But essentially, you need to move forward having more positive experiences with love in order to kind of indirectly squeeze this negative energy out. It kind of happens automatically, right? If you have all of these different orbs, the more positive ones that you have, the more naturally the negative ones will kind of fade away. And it makes sense. If you think about all of your memories and you have, 99 good experiences with one topic or concept and theme and only one that's negative, you're not going to go around telling people how awful this was, unless that's really how you reframe your reality. Oh my gosh, I forgot to talk about the reframing. Okay, I want to talk about this really quickly, even though I'm going to run out of time. This is a great way if you really, really cannot go back to these memories that you can kind of indirectly transmute it. So it's definitely an option. When you go back and you reframe your memories, sorry, I had to take a break coming back to this. Okay, so you're going back to your memories and it just gets cut off before this energetic thread is resolved. There's guilt, there's shame, there's anger, you have inhabited this negative energy. You have, done bad things were done to you. There can always be a positive reframing of a situation, which I personally do not feel is bypassing. You're still acknowledging it. You're still accepting it. But instead of letting the end result ruin you and put you in this horrible negative space, you can kind of take a step back and be like, okay, this was a learning lesson that I had. I needed to go through this for this particular reason, and I've learned from this. And likelihood is you're probably going to realize that it wasn't truly your fault. You're only one in God knows how many, pieces or fractals of energy in this lifetime or past lifetimes. If you travel into a past life that you were maybe a victim of abuse, logically you would think to yourself, oh my God, there was absolutely no reason for this. But I do truly feel like we go through learning lessons for reasons. Perhaps that experience meant that you did not have to experience a worse form of abuse. Again, this is hypothetical. I'm not saying this was or is your situation whatsoever. This is just based on a lot of experience with past life regressions and channeling. The choice is up to you. You do not have to believe in this approach. You do not have to abide by this approach, but I'm telling you, this level of reframing, acceptance, forgiveness, it will truly change your life. I can't guarantee anything, but I'm basically there. You can still forgive yourself and not forget. You can still accept and not make it a part of you. You can still reframe, but simultaneously understand how challenging, difficult, and horrible an experience was. You can still learn, but not perpetuate negative energy. You can release it. This is your life, this is your energy, your body, and you're entitled to do what you want with it. But as someone who channels energy, I really, really implore you to think about this process. All right, those are the 3 steps. I hope you enjoyed. I hope that even if you don't, embark on this journey, you can still consider what was said here and hopefully integrate it into your life somehow. Thanks.